What's the real difference between someone who's just good at something and someone who's a true master? It's a huge question, right? Well, today we're digging into Robert Greene's incredible book, Mastery, to explore this hidden power that he says is inside every single one of us, just waiting to be unlocked. Okay, let's start with something we've all felt. Think back. Remember a time you were up against a crazy deadline, or maybe a real crisis popped up out of nowhere. You know that feeling, right? That intense focus where everything else just melts away and your mind is just on fire. Ideas are flowing, you're absorbed in the task. For a little while, you felt like you were completely in the driver's seat. It really reminds me of this powerful idea from the writer Goethe. He said that we all hold our fortune in our own hands, kind of like a sculptor holds a block of stone. We're all given this raw material, our potential. But the actual skill, the ability to shape it into a masterpiece, that's something we have to learn, something we have to cultivate. But here's the thing, right? If we've all had a taste of that power, that higher level of focus, why does it feel so fleeting, so out of reach most of the time? Why can't we just switch it on whenever we want? That's the big question we're going to try and answer here. Because you know what happens? The second that pressure is off, the deadline is met. Poof! That feeling is just gone. We slide right back to our default settings, just kind of passive, easily distracted, reacting to whatever life throws at us instead of actively shaping it. That sense of control, that creative spark, it just fades away. And here's a really crucial point. Our culture actually makes this worse. It feeds us this myth, this story, that true brilliance or genius is some kind of magical gift. You're either born with it or you're not. And that idea makes mastery feel like this impossible mountain to climb, something reserved for a tiny, chosen few. But what if that whole idea is just wrong? What if genius isn't some gift from the gods, but the end result of a process that's actually accessible to us? Let's break it down. So here is the big idea from the book. Mastery isn't a fluke. It's not an accident. It's literally what our brains are built for. I mean, think about it. 6 million years of evolution have shaped this incredible tool in our heads, specifically designed for deep focus, for learning, for mastery. A perfect example is the story of Charles Darwin and his cousin Sir Francis Galton. Now, Galton was the one everyone thought was a super genius. His IQ was supposedly off the charts. Darwin, on the other hand, described himself as just an ordinary boy. So who changed the world? It was Darwin, and the reason is fascinating. Galton jumped from one thing to another, never really settling. He was restless. But Darwin, he had this one intense, all-consuming passion that drove him his entire life. And that right there, that's the whole point. Mastery isn't born, it's made. It has little to do with what you're given at birth. It's all about dedication to the process. It's built piece by piece through desire, patience, and just plain old persistence. Okay, so if it's a journey, where do we start? What's the first step? Well, according to Greene, it doesn't start by looking outside for a job or an opportunity. No, the very first step is to look inward, to find what he calls your life's task. So what is this life's task? Think of it as that unique calling, that strange pull you felt when you were a kid, that deep, almost primal curiosity that made you obsessed with certain things. It's a voice, and yeah, it gets quieter as we grow up. It gets drowned out by our parents' expectations, by our friends, by our own anxieties, but Greene says it never really goes away completely. Let's jump back to Darwin for a second, because his story is perfect here. This guy was not on some fast track to greatness. His dad was a doctor and was just so disappointed in him. Darwin was a terrible medical student. To his family, he probably looked like a total failure in the making. So his dad's next idea was, okay, maybe you can be a clergyman. But Darwin just couldn't do it. He pushed back against these false paths, as Greene calls them. He couldn't ignore that inner voice, that constant pull towards something completely different, something that had fascinated him since he was a little kid. And what was this grand passion? It was collecting stuff. Seriously, bugs, shells, rocks. To pretty much everyone else, it must have looked like a pointless, childish hobby. But for Darwin, it was everything. It was that primal inclination, that deep-down curiosity about why there are so many different kinds of living things. And so he followed that feeling. Against his father's wishes, he took a position on a ship, the HMS Beagle, as the ship's naturalist. And that one decision, A decision that came from pure passion, not logic. It put him on the exact path that would lead to his life's work. It literally changed the course of human history. So once you connect with that inner voice, that life's task, the journey isn't just a random walk. There's a roadmap. And Greene breaks it down into 3 really clear phases. First up is the apprenticeship phase. This is where you're on the outside, looking in, just absorbing everything, the basic rules, the fundamental skills. Then you move into the creative active phase. Now you're getting your hands dirty, you're starting to see how it all works, and you begin to experiment. And finally, you hit the 3rd phase, mastery. This is where your understanding is so deep, so holistic, that it's basically second nature. And that final stage, that's where the real magic happens. It's when you develop this incredibly high-level intuition. To people on the outside, it looks like you're some kind of wizard.
Greene has a great term for it, a fingertip feel. You know, for a master pianist, the piano isn't just a bunch of keys anymore. It's like it's become part of their own nervous system. The knowledge is so deep, so internalized, you don't even have to think anymore. You just do.
And this isn't some mystical guesswork either. It's a powerful blend of all those years of rational, conscious practice fused with something deeper, more instinctive. It's what allows a master to see patterns, to make these lightning-fast connections that are completely invisible to the rest of us. So the path to mastery, it's not some secret handshake club for geniuses. It's a process, and it's available to anyone who's willing to put in the work. The choice to start walking that path, well, that's up to you. It kind of brings to mind what the philosopher Nietzsche said. He pointed out that true masters have this seriousness of an efficient workman. They learn how to build the parts perfectly before they even dream of putting together the great whole. It's all about respecting the craft, respecting the process. So I guess the real question to leave you with is, what's that voice you've been silencing? What's that deep, primal interest inside you that you've been pushing aside because of all the noise from the outside world? Because finding the answer to that question, that's the very first step on your own path to mastery.